Hi, welcome back to Monday Mythbusters. Tonight we're doing things a little differently. I'm in my office and Leslie is out of town, so you can see her on our shared screen. Leslie, can you hear me? I don't hear Leslie. Okay, let's see what we can do to make this work. Um, okay. Okay, I see Leslie, but
Oh,
I
I
don't
can
see
hear
her.
you now. Can you hear me
Okay,
now?
I can hear you now. Okay,
Sorry about that.
technology. Okay, so
Bear with us.
first hurdle crossed. Okay, that's awesome. Yes, I'm not an IT person, so you'll have to just bear with me while I learn all these new technologies. So tonight, Monday Mythbusters, and we are going to talk about 5 secrets for loving your brain. Leslie, welcome back. I'm so glad that you could come and join us, even though you're out on the road.
Hi, guys. This
Um,
is new
so,
for us.
Yeah. So tonight, Leslie and I wanted to talk about the brain and loving your brain because we have Valentine's Day coming up, and I thought it would be appropriate to talk about loving a certain part of your body. And the brain is very topical this year, and so we thought we would talk about that, things that we can do to love our brain. And we have both had very less than ideal days for loving our brain, so we thought that this would be a good way to kind of talk about some of the things that can go on in everybody's life because not everybody can create this perfect environment that is exactly what we want. So we're going to talk about kind of some of the experiences we had today and ways that maybe we can help give ideas so that you can bring a little bit more health to your brain in your everyday life. Right, Leslie?
Yes, definitely. Challenge today.
Right. So I did jury duty today. And so I was doing my civic duty. I'm very happy that I could do that because I love a democracy. However, it does put me totally out of my elements. So we're in a big building that's a little moldy with fluorescent lights, with no easy access to healthy food unless you bring it with you, but no place to really warm it up. So there's all kinds of things that were going on there. Nobody wants to drink much water, so because we don't have ready access to the restroom unless we put our hand up and ask the judge, which nobody wants to do. And so there's a lot of different things about the day that were very unhealthy, including the lack of activity. So we're going to talk about a lot of these things. And Leslie, why don't you share some of those things that you found to be less than ideal for your brain today?
Yes, I'm also in a position where I'm in a meeting and it's back-to-back meetings all day, 20 minutes on every 20 minutes, and we're in a hotel room, again confined. I haven't seen the light of day. We really don't even have time to break to go grab something to drink or to eat. So I do have snacks in our room and things like that, but it's definitely it's been a tough struggle. It's early days flying in. There's a time change. Not getting the right sleep and waking up a little bit dehydrated, not being able to exercise like I normally would. It definitely has me kind of frazzled mentally. So agree.
Right. So this is kind of a really good topic for today, given our days, because we usually can create a much healthier lifestyle, and we'll show you some of the things that we do in our normal days, and then what we do when we're kind of in a situation that's not as well engineered as we usually like. Um,
Exactly.
One of the things that I did really like, though, about today, which is good for your brain, is that I got to meet a whole bunch of new people. And one of the number one ways to have a healthy brain and a healthy life is community. Harvard did a big study, a very large longitudinal study that was over 75 years, almost 80 years. They followed a group of people that were sophomores in Harvard from 1938, and they looked at their cholesterol, at their blood sugar, at their brow size, at a whole bunch of different markers, their waist size, a whole bunch of different things. And as they've grown older and we've had more technology, they've done MRIs. So they have a whole bunch of different things that they can look at to see what's the best predictor of a healthy brain and a healthy longevity. And it was community. It was having a community of people that loved you and you loved them. It was having a good marriage or good friends around you. So these are key things. And today I met new people. So I thought that was really an awesome way to spend a day that otherwise was, a little less than what I would have wanted. But what about you, Leslie?
Same thing, actually. That was the one positive benefit is we did have a different face walking in each day, and everyone has a story. And it was nice to meet, 20 different meetings. We had multiple people in each meeting, so it was pretty neat. Definitely, wasn't feeling lonely.
No, definitely not. Lots of people around. So that's the number one thing that I would say. Look at your world, look at your community, whether it's a church, a temple, a group of friends, a walking group, the group that you do yoga with, your friends at work. But make sure that you're surrounded by people who care about you and that you care about them. And that is actually good for your brain. Anything to add there?
No, I'm sorry, I'm on a delay, so it took me a second to grab that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, then I'll maybe step into number 2, unless you had something to add.
No, we're good. Let's move on to number 2.
Yeah, because we have lots to cover tonight, and
Yeah.
not another 20 minutes or so. So there's some very typical things that that we're going to talk about, and food, of course, is going to be one of them. There are foods that are quote unquote brain foods, but generally just eating healthy, eating lots of high fiber foods, lots of vegetables, nuts and seeds, things that are high in your omega-3s, high proteins, but not too high, but a good amount of protein, because of course our brain is in a large part protein and fat. And I think the fat is a key thing that we really wanted to touch on. Healthy fats, not just any kind of fats, because your brain is, some people I've read 70%, other places I've read 85%, but somewhere between 70 and 85% of your brain is fat. So you need to have plenty of good fat in your diet. And that can be avocados, nuts, seeds, olives, olive oils, seed oils, some seed oils, not all seed oils, but a variety of good oils and fats in your diet can be very healthy.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember too, fat is a source of energy as well. So it's more energy dense than carbs and even protein. So with the good quality fats, they're providing immediate fuel source to your brain. So you don't have to break it down. A carbohydrate has to be broken down into glucose and then absorbed differently. So those healthy fats are actually going to give you a little bit more of kind of a quick boost, if you will. So definitely bringing those with you. And in a case like us today, like we were talking earlier about how we both had our nuts as our snack and something to munch on, because if you're in a position where you have the alternative of eating either nothing or something maybe smaller, rather than something that's just like convenient and processed and yucky, you're almost better off just fasting and kind of giving your body a break in general.
Right. And because I knew I was not probably going to be wild about the food in the cafeteria, I made sure I had a good breakfast. I had a couple of eggs and a whole avocado. And so there's some good protein, there's some good fats, and I was ready for the day, even though we went a little longer than they had intended. I just actually got home now. I was fine for most of the day. I had a little nut bar and was good pretty much otherwise. So just kind of thinking about your day and kind of creating a good, strong breakfast. Trying to bring something with you, obviously, if you can, that's good for lunch and other meals.
Yeah, and I think, I don't have one offhand because there's going to be hundreds to do with this, but obviously the processed carbs and the sugars are going to be not just impactful to your brain from a functioning standpoint, but long term, and some of the disease states that are being really, Alzheimer's is being coined type 3 diabetes. So making sure that you're eating the right foods, not just for today and you're functioning today, but what's going to ultimately long term serve you best in your health.
Absolutely. And those high sugar, simple carb meals are really not great for your brain. They give you the quick energy, but then you get the real dive afterwards. And we've already spoken before about all the negatives of a lot of sugar in your diet. So really trying to look at all the hidden places that you can find sugar, because that is definitely bad for your brain in terms of both short term, the day-to-day, as well as the long term in your dementia risk.
Definitely.
Yeah. So the next thing on our list that was really important for loving your brain is sleep. Okay, sleep is critical for a healthy brain. And we don't actually know all the things that sleep does for our brain and for our body in general. They're still kind of puzzling over that, but we do know that it's of paramount importance. If you don't have sleep consistently, if you're deprived of sleep, and this is what we do to torture some people sometimes, that can actually make you lose your mind, literally, can make you over time go demented. It can, in fact, some studies indicate lead to an early death if you're sleep deprived. So sleep is really critical. One of the things about sleep, just kind of as a little kind of science nerdy tidbit that I always think is really cool, is that when we sleep, our brain changes. When we're awake, we have this thing called a blood-brain barrier that keeps the cells really tightly opposed, so things from our blood don't get into our brain. It's a way of keeping our brain safe from chemicals and different molecules that may not be ideal for our brain to see. So we have a very, very fine system that only lets certain things in for the most part. Now, when you sleep, that changes. So during the day, you're processing, you're thinking, you're metabolizing things, and you're building up these toxins. But the blood-brain barrier also keeps things from going back out. It not only protects you from things in, but it helps to keep things from going back out. So when we sleep, that blood-brain barrier gets just a little open and allows some of the lymph to flow through our brain and clean it. And so it's a way to get rid of the daily metabolic toxins that our body has produced. So it's really, really imperative to get a good 6 to 8 hours, 6 for some people, but most people really need about 8 hours of sleep to really function well.
Yeah, and I think as we touched a little bit on sleep, and we'll probably touch on it in most every episode of Mythbusters because so many things around sleep that's critical to health. I think just understanding all of the functions that is happening, it's not only working to cleanse your brain and to form memories and turn memories into long term. There's a ton of hormonal things that are happening when you sleep that are really important. It's one of the only ways to actually improve your testosterone or through the human growth hormone. And it's, there's kind of that critical few hours in the morning when your body's really working hard to restore you. So it's something that not only the quality and the time frame that you're sleeping, but the actual quality of the sleep and making sure that you're actually getting that deep, light, and REM sleep, and all of which are going to be determined by, some of the other factors that we're talking about, the food, the diet, the things that you're doing to enhance that quality sleep.
Right. And to that point, some people will use prescription aids to help them sleep, or over-the-counter aids like things with the equivalent of the diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl or Ambien or other sleep aids. And these all change your sleep architecture, so you don't get that restorative sleep. And there are some studies, they haven't been consistent, but there are some studies that show that Ambien increases your risk of dementia and of shrinkage of your brain, the white matter of your brain. So lots of good reasons to use other ways of getting to sleep, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in another Mythbusters, but just trying to get sleep more naturally. Melatonin, fine. Trazodone is one of those drugs that do not change your sleep architecture. But those are the two key medications or over-the-counter supplements that can help you sleep without really disrupting that sleep architecture.
Yeah, and I think another great one is just magnesium. Having Epsom salt bath or some sort of topical magnesium application before you go to bed. Magnesium is kind of that relaxation mineral. And then also with melatonin, remember too, most of the ones that are on the market are not actually at a dose that's even realistic. The one that's patented, the melatonin that's patented, is actually, I believe, 2 or 2.5 milligrams. The ones you see on the market are going to be 3 and above. And so some people I know are pounding 15 milligrams of melatonin. And what that's doing is that's really reducing your body's own ability to produce its own, number one. And then, a lot of people use Xanax. I get people that say, well, what about Xanax? It really helps me relax and helps me sleep. And again, to your point, the nutrient deficiency that might be caused by that, one of which would be a melatonin suppression. So just being aware and mindful that while something might be helping you immediately, you might not be getting that pure quality, and it might not be something. Some people just start to think that they have to take that in order to sleep, when they really need to realize that they might not need it anymore at some point.
Yeah, and it's a whole other talk too, but really creating that nighttime routine so you don't go from 100 miles an hour or screeching your heels in and going to a dead stop and expecting your body to do the same thing and just magically fall asleep. I always coach people to take about an hour to kind of really start to decrease the tone of the day and relax and get away from screens, all that kind of stuff. But that's really important for a good quality sleep as well.
Yes, definitely.
Love that brain, give it sleep. So then the next topic that we wanted to talk about was all the self-talk that we do. So we were going with really kind of physical things like your food and your sleep, but there's so much of this internal chatter that goes on that's really negative. And so becoming aware of how much negative self-talk you give yourself and trying to turn that around, because you would never speak to a friend the way you often speak to your own self. And that over time really impairs your ability to function, to be resilient. And they have actually studied that and looked at how that can affect your function, how that affects you learning, how that affects you dealing with problems. So it is not a characteristic that should be emulated to just kind of browbeat yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people need to realize that the brain is eavesdropping, on your thoughts. So as you're thinking and saying these things to yourself, they're very powerful. It's much more powerful than you would think, because they're just thoughts sometimes. They're not necessarily words you're not saying. But your brain can also learn to autocorrect and kind of automatically shift that thought to something more positive as you repeat it. It takes practice, but your brain will ultimately start to kind of toggle back and forth with what the kind of the negative thing is into that replaced thought. So really practicing, and sometimes even having maybe your own affirmation or some sort of, like, if you know that you have a tendency to say certain things to yourself, having that kind of automatic thought stopping process where you tell yourself, okay, when I think this is what I'm going to replace it with. And your brain will start to grab onto that and really autocorrect and fix some of that thinking for you.
Right, exactly. And thoughts become things. It really is true. You can see that with kids. If you always focus on what they're doing wrong, they'll keep doing that wrong because it's getting them attention. If you focus on what they do right, they'll keep doing that. So what we focus on is what happens. And that's not just our children, but in our own brains. So, right, having that kind of little line that you can think about, oh, I'm so stupid. No, that was the necessary thing that you did in the moment, and you didn't, try to understand why you were doing it, and rather than beat yourself up, kind of help yourself see that it was appropriate in the moment, or that you're going to do something different next time. Do what you would do to a good friend. Just talk to yourself that same way.
Yes, definitely. That's a big problem, I think, in general, in a lot more brain health, but just our health in general and the way that we talk to ourselves.
Right. And if people do speak to you in that negative way, then they're toxic too. And that's something that you want to consider distancing yourself from, and really trying not to have toxic people in your world that put you down, that make you feel bad, that make you feel like you're not worthy. And these are not people that are people you want to have around. It's just like breathing bad gas. Who wants that, right? It's not good for us.
Definitely. And on the flip side of that is when people are complimentary and they're saying positive things to you, really kind of gathering those thoughts and those positive things and drawing them into yourself. And when people are giving you that type of feedback, it's really important to receive it and allow it to be part of who you are and who in your heart and then your mind. And you need to, when people say something nice to you and it's positive and reinforcing, believe it. Just believe it. And it's really hard because sometimes we're also accustomed to shunning away from compliments or, not being able to take a compliment. But I think if we were aware of how many times we're trying to stifle a compliment, maybe just not saying anything but thank you, and even I receive that. That's a really powerful way of just taking in positive things.
Right. The other thing that's kind of the extension of that is I counsel some people each night to just write down 2 or 3 things that they did that day that were great, whether that's, they made a great breakfast, they gave a great discussion, they wrote a great paper, They just showed up when they really didn't even feel like getting out of bed, and they showed that determination. It can be from the very small to the bigger, but it doesn't have to be big. But just 3 things that you're happy about, where you performed, where you did what you wanted to do, and that builds. Because then on days when you're feeling really down and out, maybe a presentation didn't go the way you wanted, or just something negative happened in your day, you can go back and you can see all the good things that go on. In fact, one year I gave jars to my staff to write down just one nice thing that happened that day, and then they would put it in the jar. And at the end of the year, they could take out all these little pieces of paper with all these wonderful events that had happened. And I got a lot of good comments about how nice that was. It was just a really warming experience for them to remember all those special events.
I love that. What a great exercise.
It was good. Yeah, it was fun. So
Kristen says here, affirmation and gratitude journal has changed my life. And I would agree with that too, because to your point about gratitude and journaling, sometimes we don't see how far we've come and how many accomplishments we've made until we look back on it. So you might get to the end of the week and forget about all these wonderful things that you might have accomplished or had, in your days. So that gratitude, sometimes I call it a wins. You might make a little list of the wins, the things that were great. And then affirmations, again, kind of goes hand in hand with some of those positive thought processes that we're trying to develop and make a habit.
Correct, absolutely. And that kind of extends to our next point, is looking at some people will have anxiety and be worried about things, and that can also create a really negative environment in your brain, because that anxiety is worry about future events, and feeling like you might not be worthy, you might not figure out or problem solve, you might not be able to handle whatever the situation is. And most of the time, it's not accurate. So there you've just done a whole dress rehearsal for this event that never happened. And so you've lived through it. And then if it does happen, you've lived through it twice. So it really is a complete waste of time and energy. And it kind of focuses, again, your energy on the negative, which if you keep focusing on that tends to happen.
Yeah, and I think this is some real stuff here. Your brain does not know the difference. Like your brain can it's getting the stimuli either way. So if you're putting yourself in that experience, and I always go back to watching the news on this, and when people are watching the news consistently, it's almost always negative things. You're not hearing this positive, exciting news for the most part, unless you're out seeking to find it. But when you listen to the news, like you're automatically empathizing, or you're looking at a situation and going, oh my gosh, I can't imagine if that would have happened. And what you've done now is you've just imagined it. And now your imagination, your brain doesn't really understand the difference. Is this real? Am I going through this? Putting yourself in that anxious position, or you're foreseeing the potential thing or danger that could happen in the future. It's really just not just wasteful, and it's damaging. It's damaging long term. And when it comes to a time that either you, God forbid, ever have to experience something as tragic, or you don't have to experience it, now you've put your body through it twice, or you've already put yourself through something you never had to begin with. And it's just if you think of it that way, sometimes you might try to take yourself out of the situation and be more mindful of that.
Right. So when you find yourself kind of going down that rabbit hole, just identifying that, just saying, okay, I'm about to start this, and then just kind of bringing yourself back to the present, whether that's your breath or a mantra, or just kind of how your butt feels in your chair, but just back to where you are right now, rather than all this cascade of things that you're worrying about happening. That can sometimes help you. And just a reminder that, you're okay, you're safe, assuming that you really are, and you're not in one of these situations, which most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's all up here. So then just kind of bring yourself back, and so that you can have that more of a positive state of brain waves.
Yeah, and even on the flip side of that, the whole hindsight thing, looking back, similar, the guilt, the shame, or something that's already happened in the past. It doesn't serve anyone, especially yourself, to kind of live in that place where you can't go back and change something that's already happened.
Right, exactly. Then 2 last things. I think we actually had more than 5, so you got a bonus, a Valentine's bonus. Training. So brain training. If you love your brain, exercise it. So we go out there, we celebrate the Super Bowl, which just happened, and that was fun. But we need to do things for the brain and to really celebrate people that do great things with the brain. And so we definitely know that when you exercise your brain, you start to build new neural networks. And so, how do we exercise the brain? Many different ways. It can be actually as simple as walking. One of the best ways to avoid dementia is to walk. And that's not only because we're exercising, we're getting fresh air, but we're also kind of navigating in a system. We're having to go over heights and across places, and we're having to learn terrain and figure out how to get back. So we actually use our brain for a lot of things, walking. So walking is a key thing. And then there's, of course, puzzles, Lumosity, Sudoku, there's Neuronation. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of brain training, brain exercising apps you can get on your phone or on the computer that all are trying to help build these new connections between nerves. And then the other way, of course, is learning a new language. People that speak multiple languages tend to learn, I don't know if they learn easier, but they have some more adept brains. And music is also considered a language. So really trying to learn something new like a language or music. Or even, and this was something I was reading recently, dancing. If you learn a new dance step, because you're not only getting the physical exercise, you're having to learn a routine, and you're having to kind of manipulate it all on the spot while you're actually moving. So you don't have much time to process. Your body has to be reactive. So
Yeah.
all different ways.
Yeah, for sure. To go along with that too, some of the other things you could do right at home without necessarily even the apps. Well, those are great too. But I had to learn that fun fact about the righties and the lefties and how left-handers tend to live in a very right-handed society. And because they're using both sides of their brain more frequently than a right-handed person, they technically have a little bit of an advantage there because they're constantly utilizing both sides of their brains. So that being said, trying to do some of the things that you would normally do in everyday life with your non-dominant hand. So even writing in a journal actually with the non-dominant hand, not only does that stimulate the opposite side of your brain, it improves creativity. And also, trying to wash your hair with the opposite hand, brushing your teeth, believe it or not, that's actually much more challenging than it sounds. I like to do it with dishes, even brushing your hair. Little things that you wouldn't necessarily think would be super challenging, but all really super good ways to get that other side of your brain going. Same with balance exercises. So if you're, better on one leg than the other, just standing on one foot in counting, little things like that. Mm-hmm. Just remember, if you're using one part all of the time, your brain's you just got to jazz it up. You got to change things up and get things going.
Yep, absolutely. And then the final things, we just have a couple minutes left, is, of course, I will always want to speak about exercise. Exercise is critical. Okay, that's how you get oxygen into your brain. That's how you build what's called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This 30 seconds, 60 seconds of high intensity starts to build that in your brain, and that creates these new connections. But protect your brain when you're doing the exercise. So if you're on any kind of contact sports, you need to be wearing a helmet. If you're riding a bike, you need to be wearing a helmet. And what was the other one I was thinking of? Seatbelts. Yeah, that was the other thing. Seatbelts if you're in a car, because you don't want to get thrown through the windshield, right? Protect that brain. So always be thinking about ways that you can protect it, because it's going to be there for you if you do, right? And if you don't want to be there. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
And you won't be the one worrying about it. It's going to be everybody taking care of you if you don't protect your brain.
Exactly.
So do we have any questions?
Let me see if I can pull some here. I have just some good, really positive feedback. Thank you guys. Michelle says she's really enjoying this. Kristen, Sally, and Ellen, great topic, great information. I got Uncle Bruce watching. Hi, Uncle Bruce. Yeah, so I don't see any immediate questions. Does anyone have any questions before we sign off? I guess it's just really important to just reiterate, not to underestimate that. And the other thing is too, I think a lot of people think that when you know, like drinking in college and all these things, sometimes they get to where they think that once they do the damage, it's not fixable. And there's some truth to that in the sense that, yeah, where you're not necessarily going and creating new brain cells per se, but you are able to, like you said, regenerate connections in the brain. And, you know, the neuroplasticity is a very big science going on now. And it really is important to be doing some of these simplistic moves and some of these things where you're just generating activity on both sides. You can actually just get the communication firing in different areas in your brain. That's going to really keep you at that max capacity as long as possible. And, you know, so important for dementia, Alzheimer's, and just the way those numbers are drastically increasing as far as what the future looks like in terms of those disease states. So the good fat and all of the things we're talking about are so critical to keep your brain in sharp shape.
Right. So we did have a question here. What about essential oil diffuser and salt lamps in bedroom? So I always have a concern with the essential oil diffusers, and that is that sometimes the essential oils aren't very good quality. So it really kind of depends on the quality and on your ability to handle smells, because your body has to, you know, remove those from your body. A lot of people can't handle smells, but if it's a good quality one and your body can handle that, it can be very relaxing. So you can use lavender, for example, to help you sleep, that type of thing. So just as long as you're aware of what your own personal limitations are.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Essential oils are very powerful, and they're very intimate to use too. So there's some I think that are very specific to certain types of things that your goals are. So like you were saying, the lavender for sleep and stuff. But then the sensitivity and the quality of oils that are out there, it's making sure that you really know that you have your hands on the right stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for showing up, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. And remember, please send us some comments. If you have any ideas for what we should talk about, please give us likes and share us as much as possible so that we can spread the word about these different things that people can do without really much aggravation, right? These are different ways to live in the real world that help make you healthier little by little by little by little. Okay? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, guys. Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Bye.